Okay, we made it back. At least you and me. Oh, James is here too. Haven't seen you in a while.
We made it. We made it.
Okay, let's go on. As I promised, this will not take as long, partly because we're tired. Not that we shouldn't do the daf in great detail, but it is late. Says the
We're
next.
waiting for Nava, huh?
I want to give Nava her space. We'll see if she makes it. So, now we're about to start Daf Pei Zion, which is Sunday's Daf. It's 10:32, so we're an hour and a half early. Says the Mishnah at the top of Pei Zion Amud Aleph, sorry, the third line of Pei Zion, Shachat velo kisa. Right, this is what I mentioned earlier, and when we talked about today's daf. If you shecht, but you don't do kisui adam for whatever reason, you get a call, you run away, the blood is sitting there on the ground. Ra'ah acher chayav l'chasot. Someone else comes and they find the blood, they have to cover it. It's not just a responsibility on the shechter, on the shochet, it's on everybody. Kisov and itzgala. Now, if you shecht the blood, you cover the blood, sorry, and it gets uncovered, so you pour dirt on it, and then the wind comes and blows away the dirt. Patrum in the chasod, you don't have to do it again. But kisoa ruach, if the wind covers it, meaning a person checks, and before anyone covers it, it gets covered naturally. But then it gets uncovered, chayiv the chasod. Then you have to cover it because no one ever did the mitzvah. So we'll see all this in the Gemara. Now, Tanarabana, it says in the Gemara, what is this all based on? The pasuk I quoted earlier, it says v'shafach v'chisa, right? The end of the pasuk. It says if you take chayav of asher ye'achel v'shafach et damo v'chiso ba'afar. You shecht it and you cover it. What that tells you is that you, meaning you, the individual, misha shafach yichaseh, the person who did shvicha, who did the shchita, should be the one to cover it. But what if you don't? Shachat velo kisal v'ro acher minayin shechayiv l'chasot. If the person didn't do the responsibility and someone else saw it, how do you know you're chayiv to cover it? Shenemar v'omar lebnei Yisrael. Right, the beginning of the pasuk is very unusual. It says, say, that's the next pasuk actually. It says, say to all bnei Yisrael, ki nefesh kol basar dama b'nafshohu, v'omar lebnei Yisrael. So this is something that's chayiv ashar l'chol bnei Yisrael. This applies to all the people. Tanya Irich, now there's another Breita that speaks this out. V'shafach v'chisa b'ma sheshafach bo yichaseh. With the same thing you use to do shchita, which is your hand, you should use that to do kisui. Bo yichaseh, telling you, which obviously would be intuitive, don't use your feet to do kisui hadam. Don't put the dirt over with your toes. Shlo yichasenu b'regel. Right? You shouldn't cover it with your feet. Shelo yeh mitzvot b'zuyot. Then it's like it looks like you're using your foot to do a mitzvah. That is not a good, nice thing. You should use your hand to dig out the dirt, to cover the dirt for kisei adam. Tanya Irech, there's another Breita which says v'shafach v'chisa misha shafach hu yichasenu. That even though our Mishnah said that there's a mitzvah for everyone, the ideal mitzvah, the first right of this mitzvah is the person who did shchita. And in fact, Maaseh, this is a Breita, Maaseh be'echad sheshachat, there was a story once where someone did shchita, and before he had a chance to do kisoy, someone else came along and said, oh, I'll do that for you. The kadam chavero v'kisa, his friend came and covered the blood, and Rabbi Gamliel said to the second guy, you have to pay him because you ruined his mitzvah. V'chivo Rabbi Gamliel, itein lo asara zehuvim. Gamliel, the Tana, made the second person give the shochet 10 zehuvim, 10 gold coins, which is a lot of coins, right? In order, because he took away his mitzvah. Now, of course, the question asked the Gemara, which that seems on the surface to be a very interesting question. Iboilu, they asked, why is the second guy, right? Why is Shimon, in this case, have to give 10 zehuvim to Ruvain? Is it because he took away his mitzvah, because he's a kisoy hadam, schar mitzvah, or schar bracha, or because he took away his bracha? Because Reuven can make a bracha on kisoy adam, and since Shimon did it for him, he can't make the bracha. So which one is it that you took away his mitzvah, you took away his bracha? This is where this seems a very interesting question. But lamay nafkamina, why are you asking? And the obvious question is lebirkat hamazon. If I steal your birkat hamazon, that's 4 brachot, right? So do I have to pay you 10 zuhuvim because I took away your mitzvah, or 40 zuhuvim because I took away your brachot? Now, this, of course, is very strange because, what does that even mean that you took it all away, right? Anyways, let's
And Rashi was saying the brachas on the shechita.
no. So there's separate things. You make a bracha on the kisoy hadam. The question before was whether the act of kisoy hadam is a hefsek between one shechita and another shechita. So before we were talking about the bracha on the shechita because the question was the hefsek. Here we're talking about the bracha on this mitzvah of Kisvei Adam, which, like every other mitzvah,
I
you have
thought you
to.
said there was a commentator who said the bracha is actually on the shechita, and that's why he says in the Havsek.
So before, no, yesterday or 5 minutes ago stuff, the question was about shchita and whether there's a hefsek between one shchita and the other. That is correct. Here the question is, you obviously the person who did the shchita made a bracha on the shchita. The question is whether the person who stole his mitzvah stole his bracha on kisoi hadam, which also requires a bracha.
There's two
So,
brachot.
two brachot, correct, or many more, because if you separate the kisoi, you'd have to make multiple brachot.
Mhm.
Um, so iyam tzar mitzvah. If you say that the reason Rabbi Gamliel made the guy pay is because he stole his mitzvah, so then Birkat Hamazon is one mitzvah, achari, right? And it's ten zuhuvim. Iyam tzar bracha havin arba'in. It would be 40. So what is the halacha? And we are going to resolve it from a very, very interesting statement and a very interesting story. So Tashma, we got a great story. The Amr le huna hahu mina the Rebbe. I don't know if everyone has the same girsa. My Gemara has Mina, but on mine has a Haga'ah, who says that many changes to Tzeduki. I don't know if everyone's Gemara has Mina as well. But anyways, there was a
It's
min.
Dookie.
You have Tzeduki. Okay, so that's one of the Girsaot on the side. So a person who was a heretic, we'll say, said to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, you guys believe that there's one God, but it's not true, because look at the psukim. Misha yatzar harim liyatz dobar ruach. The one who created the mountains did not create the winds. Misha bara ruach yatzar harim. Because the pasuk says in Amos, ki hine yotzer harim u'barei ruach. It says the creator of the mountains and the creator and it uses two words, right? Yotzer harim u'barei ruach. So there's the creator of the hills, the crafter of the hills, and there's the creator of the wind. Amalei, so Rabbi Yehuda said to him, Shota, you idiot. Shafil the Sefer the Kra. You didn't read the end of the pasuk. The end of the pasuk says, Hashem Tzvaot Shemo, that this creator is God. So clearly it's one person. Amarle, so this Tzeduki, or this Min, as whatever gersa you have, was a little embarrassed, and he said to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, "The kotli zimna tlata yume madrina le'tiyufta." Give me 3 days to think about this. I'm going to look at my references, my sources. I'm going to prove to you that you're wrong, that there's multiple presences of gods, right? This obviously was a very Roman argument. So Yativ Rebbe Tlatanita. Now Rebbe said, I guess Rebbe didn't have the luxury of saying no to the guy. So he had 3 days that he was nervous the whole time. This guy's going to come and drive me crazy and prove me wrong and report me to the authorities. So he sat 3 fast days each day, as he was waiting for these 3 days. So at the end of the 3 days, the guy never showed up. So Rebbe was like, okay, I'm out of the clear. Kihavi kab boy mivra. He sat down to eat his meal, to finally break his fast and eat and enjoy because this guy's out of the picture. Amrilay, and unfortunately, of course, the doorman then said to Rebbe, Mina koy abava. This min is standing at the doorway, or stuki koy abava, I presume. Amar, and so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, "Oh yeah," and he quoted the pasuk in Tehillim, but says "V'yitzna bebaruti rosh." They put poison into my food, meaning they're ruining everything for me. These tzedukim. So Amar Le, the guy walked in. He said, "No, no, Rabbi, don't worry. I'm the different tzeduki. I'm a different min. Rabbi mivaser tovot anilach. I am a good news bearer to you. I'm mivaser tovot, right? Which is what the bracha for. We want the mivaser tovot, as we say on Hoshana Rabbah, right? I am the one bringing good news, and in fact, this initial guy, the Stuki or the Min, lo matzah tshuva, right? Your enemy did not find a good answer, and he was so embarrassed that instead of coming back and admitting that, nafam nagad v'meit, he jumped off the roof. He committed suicide, right? Again, clearly, I don't exactly know why this was such a big deal, but clearly it was a big deal. So I have good news for you. You don't have to worry about that guy anymore. So this is great. Rabbi Danasi was super thrilled. So he said to the min, what anyone would have said, brought me such good news. You want to eat dinner with me? Come join me for the meal. You can have some, whatever they were eating, some delicious food. Amar Elohim, I'd be happy to. So they sat down and they ate, and they ate and they drank. Amar Lo, so now Rabbi Yehuda Nasi felt like he had to invite him to bench, right? Because that's the covenant you're supposed to give. Again, why Ridonasi cared? I guess these were very respectable people or Roman noblemen or something. But clearly there was some pressure to treat the guy with respect. And he said to him, I have to give you the custom to bench, to lead the benching. But he didn't want to because the guy was a min. So Rebbe said to him, look, I'll buy you out. Amar lo, kosher bracha tashotel arba'im zehuvim atanotel. Do you want to bench, or we could pay you? People who give up the benching, we give them a prize of 40 zehuvim, again, which was a lot of money. Now, before we get the answer of the min, this is the proof to our question, which is how much do you have to pay? You see, it's 40 zehuvim for 4 brachot of benching. So you see, it's for each bracha, you have to pay 10. Okay, that's why we're quoting the story. But what's the end of the story? Amarlo, of course, the min said to Rebbe, I'll bench. I'd rather bench than take the money. So Amarlo, he said to him, I'll kosher bracha nishoteh. I would rather lead the benching than take the money. Yatzda batko v'amran. Of course, a voice came out from the Shemaim and said, kosher bracha shava arba'im zuvim. You see that it's so valuable to lead the benching. It's worth 40 gold pieces. So you see from here the end of the story. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said that's the halacha, that Rabbi Gamliel, I'm not sure if it's halacha, but it's Rabbi Gamliel's point that if you steal someone else's mitzvah, you have to pay 10 zuvim. It's because you're missing the bracha. And by benching, it has to be 40. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Nasir Rabbi Yitzchak, just the codex to this story is that this person, this Roman min or whoever he was a very respectable person. Adayin yeshna oto mishpacha ben gedolei Romi. That family is still around among the elite in Rome. V'korin oto mishpachat bar Luvianis. They were called the family of Livianis. So they are people who treated Rabbi Yehuda Nasi well, and they still have their wealth and kavod. Anyways,
Where's the Bat Kol saying?
the Bat Kol is just basically saying that you see that the kosher bracha is worth so much money, that meaning someone in this case the Roman would give up a ton of money in order
No,
to
we'll give up the money to.
right.
Okay.
Anyways, back to our Gemara. That's a nice side story. Our
The
Mishnah
Bat
said,
Kol was stating the obvious.
Kisov and its gala. Someone who covered the blood, our Mishnah said, and it got uncovered, you don't have to do it again. Why is this different than the mitzvah of Hashavat Aveda? Damar, we learned in Masechet Bava Metzia that Hashev, it says in the pasuk, Hashev tashiv la'achicha, you should return a lost thing, afilo me'apamim, even if the person keeps losing it over and over, right? They're obviously Hashavat Aveda was often animals, right? So their cow runs away, you give it back, it runs away, you have to keep giving it back every time. So why don't you say the same thing about Kisoy Adam? Amalek is hatam lochtiv miuta. There's no miut. It never says only do it once. Hachachtiv miuta vikisahu. It says you cover it. And it could have just said, Rashi says vikisa, you cover. The who tells you only one time. You only have to do it once. So you're not chayav to keep doing it. But kisa ruach, but if the wind covers it, meaning it's covered on its own, then we said you don't have to cover it. But if it gets revealed, you have to cover it. Or the Mishnah didn't quite say that. The Mishnah said, kisa ruach chayav lechasot. That if the wind blew some dirt over it, you have to cover it. So says Rabbi Bar Chanan, Rabbi Yochanan, you only have to cover it. That's only if it was uncovered on its own, right? If the blood is in the ground covered by dirt, you don't have to cover it. Says more why? Why do you have to cover it if it gets unrevealed? Once it was covered, the mitzvah's gone, right? I don't get it. Once the blood was covered, there was dirt on top of it. Why don't you say the mitzvah is pushed away? There's no more mitzvah of kisoy hadam, and the fact that you now get it uncovered, you shouldn't have a mitzvah to cover it. Amar of Papa says Papa. That's exactly the point. Zotomer. This is how we know ein dichoy it's all mitzvot. That mitzvot don't get pushed off. Just because the blood was covered does not mean there's no more mitzvah to do it. If it gets uncovered at some point, there's still a mitzvah. No one has yet covered this blood. And so if it gets uncovered, the mitzvah comes back. It says, where is that true? My shna, Mehadetanya, why is it different than the following Braita, which said, Hashochet v'nivla dam bekarka chayv l'chasot. If you shecht on dirt and the blood goes into the ground, you have to still cover it. Why do you have to still cover it? It's covered by the earth. It says, it's not covered there. Hatam kisharishumo nikar. That's where you can see the blood stain on the ground. You've got to cover it. Here it's referring to where it was completely covered naturally. You don't have to cover it. Only if it gets uncovered, then you have to do it. So that is the difference between those two cases. And finally, for tonight, says the Mishnah at the bottom of Daf Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, the next halacha, we actually mentioned this earlier in Zvachim, which we're going to get to in a second, What if the blood got mixed with water? So dam shitarav b'mayim, you shechted a bird. Let's say you shechted it, it fell into a container that had water. And so now it's not blood anymore. It's blood that's mixed with water. Says our Mishnah, well, it depends on what it looks like. Im yesh bo marit dam, if it has the appearance of blood, chayiv l'chasot, you have to cover that liquid. But if it doesn't, then you don't, right? So if there's so much water there that it's a majority, it's not a majority, it doesn't look like blood, then you don't have to cover it. Now, obviously, it's hard to define this, right? Because how much red is considered to be blood? So we talked a little bit about it in Zvachim, but it has to be something that people would look at and would say, this is blood. Okay? Nitarev biyayin. Now, let's say you mix your blood in wine. Now, red wine, of course, it's all red, but you don't know why it's red, whether it's red because of the blood of the wine. Says the Mishnah, you have to do a scientific experiment. Ro'ino tokilu humayim. You treat the wine as if it's water, and you imagine if it's 5 parts this to 1 part that, or whatever it is, whether it's visible, and then it would be chayav for kisui. Nitarev b'dam behema b'dam chaya. Let's say you mix the blood of this animal you shechted with blood of an animal, which is not chayav in kisui, or dam of a chaya, or blood of a, no, there's different interpretations here. Rashi makes it sound like, Rashi not make it sound, Rashi says it's the blood that comes not from the shechita, what's called dam hakaza, which is not chayiv in kisui. We're going to talk a little bit about this, that there's only certain blood that's chayiv to be covered, only the blood that comes out when you shech the animal, but blood that comes from elsewhere in the animal is not chayiv to be covered. So, or Rambam's pshat in the Mishnah is that's referring to a chaya, that's a treif, that's a tme'ah, a chaya that's tameh. So, you killed an elephant and there's a lot of blood sitting there. So that's not chayiv kisui hadam. And this dam became mixed with that dam. So again, you do the same thing like a wine. Ro'eno tokilu mayim. You pretend that the other blood is water, and you imagine, would this blood still be visible if it was water? Rabbi Yehuda says, no, ein dam mevatel dam. Remember, min b'mino eno batel. We're going to get to this in next week, thankfully, finally, in great detail. That min b'mino eno batel. You don't say other blood can never be mevatel blood, and even a tiny bit of blood from a kosher chaya mixed into a lot of blood from a behema would still require kisui hadam. Continues the Mishnah, the final part, right? Oh,
Nevela has to be covered or no?
sorry, say that again.
A nevela, if you did like a bad shchita,
An avail does not have to be covered. I mean, we had a machloket earlier, but let's say it was a machloket, but we paskin that you do not have to cover it. Well, it's a little more complex than that. Yeah. So it depends on how bad the shchita is, but if it's a bad shchita, you don't have to cover it. Continues the Mishnah, damanitaz. Let's say blood that spurts out, right? You shecht an animal and you're trying to get all the blood in one place, but some of it spurts out onto the wall. Oh, shal sakin, or blood that's on the knife. Says the Mishnah, chayav l'chasot. You got to wipe that blood off and cover it. Amr Yehuda ematai bisman she'ein shamdam elohu. No, that's only if it's the only blood. So it's the only way to do the mitzvah. Aval yesh shamdam shelohu. If there's other blood, patrum min l'chasot, then you don't have to cover it. And again, we'll discuss that in the Gemara exactly what he means, what Rabbi Yehuda means by that. Says the Mishnah, Tnanatam. Now we had a Mishnah in Zvachim, which we learned, I guess, a couple months ago, about the exact same words when you talk about blood that you sprinkle on the Mizbeach, right? You take the blood from Shechita, you pour it as Zrika on the Mizbeach. What if that blood gets mixed with water? Is it still blood, and can you still put it on the Mizbeach? Dam shnitarev b'mayim, if you mix blood with water, says the Mishnah in Zvachim, the exact same thing as our Mishnah. Im yesh bo marit dam, if it still looks like blood, kasher, you can put it on the Mizbeach. Nitarev b'yayin, if you mix the blood with wine, again, red wine, so you can't see what's blood and what's wine. So then, ro'ano tokilu humayim, you imagine that the wine is water, and if it's enough that you could still see the blood, you can put it on the mizbeach. Nitarev b'dam behema b'dam chaya. If it gets mixed with blood of a behema or blood of a chaya, which shouldn't really be in the Beit Hamikdash, right? Ro'ano tokilu humayim. Again, you imagine that other blood is water, and if it's so much water that you can't see the original blood, it's batel, and you can't put it on the mizbeach, and you can't use it for zrika. Rabbi Yehuda again says, like in our Mishnah, in dam mevatel dam. No. Once you're talking about things that are the same type, there's never bittul. The fact is, this is blood, even if it's 1 part blood to 90 parts blood from another animal, it would still be considered blood from the original animal. Now, that is the
so
Gemara.
you would bring it to the midrash or no, because it has the chaya
You
in it.
would. Well, you mean because of chaya? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you would still be able to put it on the mizbeach, even though there's other blood there. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba and Rabbi Yochanan. Now this in Zvachim, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said the name Rabbi Yochanan. One second. Let's be clear. What the implication here is that if you have a minority of blood, right, and so it's mostly water, right? It's like 75% water, 25% blood, but it still looks like blood. You can put on the mizbeach. That's only true. Lo shanel shenaflu mayim letoch dam. That's only if it started off with your 25% blood, right? And you slowly poured the water into it. Because because when you pour the water into it, the water basically gets canceled out by the blood. And even though the water goes up and up and up and up, meaning you have 1 liter of blood and you have 3 liters of water, as you pour the water in, the water is canceled out by the blood. And even when you have 4 liters and only one of them is blood, it's still considered to be blood. Avon nafal dam l'toch mayim. If it happened the other way, where you had 3 liters of water or even less, right? Let's just keep 3 liters, and you poured 1 liter of blood into it, then even though it looks red, it's not considered to be blood because rishon batel. Because as you drop the blood in, one drop at a time, it gets canceled out each drop at a time, right? Because the first drop, of course, is not visible. One drop in 3 liters of water is not visible, and so the whole thing becomes not blood. That was Rabbi Yochanan's interesting halacha in Zvach. Says Rav Papa today, which is why we're quoting all of this, around 12 lines down, Le'inyan kisoy eno kain. By kisoy, it's very different. It's not true by kisoy adam, because ein dichoy etzo mitzvot. Because it's very different when you get to the mitzvah of dichoy, there is no dichoy etzo mitzvot, meaning that even though, it's what we said before, even though when that first drop came in, that drop was invisible in the water. And so you say that drop is no longer chayv in kisoy adam. The next drop came in, you could say the same thing. But remember, like we said earlier, mitzvot never go away. So that drop of blood is still chayv in kisoy adam. And at some point, when 1 liter of blood falls into this water and you can visibly see that it's blood, it comes back to life. And it's now chayav in kisoy adam. And so even though it happened in the way that by zvachim you said would not be considered to be blood, like kisoy adam, it's considered blood and you have to cover it. So that is the halacha of Rav Papa, which is a very interesting halacha. Says the Gemara now, we're halfway down, a few more minutes, we'll get there. Says Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, listen, this halacha of things that look red count as blood, even though they're mixed, is true in 3 categories. Kol marei admumit, anything that remains red, mechaprin, you can put it on the mizbeach as a kapara, meaning you could do zrikat hadam with it, and if you do, it counts like you did it. Umachshirin, they have the halacha of blood. Remember, hechsher means when a liquid falls on a fruit, remember, it becomes mutar lekabel tuma, right? So the blood that is a little bit red and mostly water is enough to be machshir of food. We're going to ask on that in a second because who cares? If it was water, it would also be machshir, right? Any liquid. So, but we're saying it still counts as blood. V'chayavim b'kisoy, and you have to cover it because it counts as blood. Says where my kamashmon. What's the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel's statement? Mechaprin, that's mechaper tanina as the Mishnah in Zvachim that we just quoted. Right? Chayvim b'kisoy, to tell me you're chayvim kisoy is our Mishnah. Tanina, that's our Mishnah. So what's the halacha? What is he telling us? The third halacha? Machshirin and strichale. He's telling you that for hechsher, remember, hechsher is the process by, remember, food is not mikabel tuma until it's touched water, right? So if let's say the water, the liquid, sorry, until it touches liquid. Let's say the liquid it touches is blood. So you're telling me it's a chiddush that even though it's 1 part blood and 3 parts water, it still counts as blood because it's red. But why is that a chiddush? Machshirin nami idam. If you count this liquid, this mixture as blood, so okay, achshuri machshir, blood is machshir. But imay achshuri machshir, if you count it as water because it's majority water, that's also hechsher, right? So what's your chiddush? That because it's a little bit red, it's considered to be blood and it'll be machshir. Even if it was not red and it wasn't blood, it would be machshir because it's water. It's why no. I'm talking about a case where the liquid is rainwater, right? Lo tzricha shetidmu b'meiki shamim. It was mixed with rainwater, meaning you shechted an animal and some of the blood fell into a container, and the container had 1 part blood and say 3 parts rainwater. Remember, rainwater, right, doesn't make things makabel tuma. It's only water. Remember, we learned asher yitain tumiyat asher yutan. You have to want that water to fall on them. If you put your figs out to dry on the roof and it rains on them, they're not muchshar lekabel tuma. Says Gemara, but still, even though it's rainwater, if you put it into the container, right, because you're collecting it, it counts as your own water. Make a shamim nami, kivan deshaka ramiach shavinu. Since you collected the rainwater and you put it into the container, you count, it now counts as regular water. Lo tzricha, says Gemara, it's talking about a case, shenitzdimu alehem. A case which I sort of mentioned, where the rainwater came on its own, meaning you didn't select for the rainwater, you didn't collect rainwater and mix it with your blood. You basically shechted the animal, and the blood fell into a container on the ground, let's just say, that was already filled with rainwater, right? And so then the fruits came into that, or that whole thing poured out over the side of the roof and it poured down on your food. So if you count this liquid as rainwater, the foods are not mikabel tuma. But the chiddush that Rav Yehuda Mishmo was telling you was that if it's red, it counts as blood, and since it's blood, it is mikabel tuma because it touched a liquid that was considered to be machshir mikabel tuma. So that is the halacha of Rav Yehuda Mishmo. I'm going to read a few more lines. We are 8 lines in the bottom. Very interesting line. Rav Asi min Naharbil Omer. Now, Rav Asi of Naharbil, which again is an unusual place, he said that, if you take slalata de dama, right? If you take blood, I don't know how to translate slalata de dama, but it literally means the thin of the blood, okay? The thin part of the blood. Let's keep that part. So obviously the context you need here, to those who are not familiar, is that if you take a tube of blood and you let it sit, right? What happens is or you spin it in a centrifuge because you don't have patience to let it sit. What happens is the red blood cells sink to the bottom, right? They're the heaviest part. And usually if you look at a tube, it's around 50% of the tube. The white blood cells are in the middle, right? That's why they're called white, because they're white in the middle. And then the top part is like this yellowish liquid that we call plasma, right? So any blood sample in animal or human is composed of red blood cells and other components that are not. So it says the Gemara now, let's say you let the blood sit for a little bit, right? And again, I don't, salat again literally means the thin part of the blood.
So
And so
here it's called blood serum.
okay, right, but that's what it's referring to. But the word salal literally means thin, right? So basically, what happens is that the blood congeals, and around the edge, Rashi puts it, or if you had a container, you have a lighter looking thing, which you called serum. It's really plasma, right? Is our word. But anyways, the non-red blood cell part of the blood. So says Rabbi Yirmiyah Beidifti, as long as it looks red, anush karet. You are chayav karet for eating. Remember, you're not allowed to eat blood. You get karet for eating blood, for eating that plasma. That's part of the blood. Says the Gemara, Vahudika kazait, but that's only if there's a kazait. We're going to see, we're not going to see actually for a while, but that is as long as you have a kazayit of blood in that plasma, right? Because that's the shear of kazayit, which of course is a solid shear, but we turn it into a liquid. B'matznita tana, now in the Mishnah we learn mitamin ba'ohel, that the same thing is true. That remember, again, we're going to discuss this tomorrow. I'm not going to get that far, but that a kizayit of blood is mitam from a dead person, right? Is mitame ba'ohel, but that's also true about the plasma that comes from the blood. V'hu de'ik revi'at, but that's only if there's a revi'at of blood in that quantity. Then it's mitame ba'ohel. I'm gonna stop here because it goes for a while. This mission actually till the 2 dots. So we're going to continue on Monday. So again, you're ahead of the case, but just to clear about talking about what happens to the blood we know is mitame, but blood that congeals and you get liquid that basically comes off it that's reddish, but not the same whole blood. That also has a halacha of blood in terms of chiyav karet for eating it and tumat mate if it's in an ohel. And the Mishnah will elaborate on that, God willing, on Monday, 5 lines from the bottom. So we did it. Shavua tov.
Thank you so much. Shavua tov.
Have a good week, everyone.
Have a safe trip.
Thank you.